welcome on in. We're glad you're here. This is season 8, episode number 4. It's the 2026 Chinese GP review. You've got Andy. I'm along with Cody tonight. Cody, long time no see. We were actually hanging out with each other yesterday, but it's a lot different weather than when we first got where we were going yesterday. It's like dropped 40 degrees. What the hell?
Yeah, we're in that wonderful time of year known as Chicago spring where it tricks you and you get a day like yesterday where it's like almost 60 degrees and you think, man, that's glorious. And then by the time we were heading home for the night, it was freezing rain and then snow. And yeah, it's the whole reason why I wish I was in the Caribbean right now.
Yeah, it's, as the English would say, it's bloody cold outside. It's definitely very cold, but we will do our best to try to keep ourselves warm. We do have a lot of sessions to go over. That will definitely help with that. If you have found our show, welcome along. We're all, as always, we're glad you're here. You can find us on Twitter or X or whatever they call it. We do put some stuff out on Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and of course here on YouTube. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. If you enjoy what you're hearing, seeing, however you consume this show, one, we're just glad you're doing it. But if you want to give us some feedback, we'll definitely be open to it. A like or a subscribe button on the YouTube side will definitely help us out. Like, subscribe, and comment. I think that's what they always say.
Mm-hmm.
To drive the algorithm in our favor. A 5-star review on your favorite podcasting app would also help out with that. Apple Podcasts or Spotify are two of the bigger ones that we are on. We are on some other ones as well. So if you just search for us, I'm sure we will come up for you. You can email the show, outlapf1@gmail.com. We'll get your thoughts to us. Thank you so much for those who continue to support the show. Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Gordon, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to help to promote the show, I am looking into the link. I've heard that maybe the link isn't quite working, so I will continue to put it in the show notes. I'm going to do this after we're recording tonight. I'm going to, if nothing else, set up a link that I have full control over. So stand by on that. I will put it in all of the show notes for you guys. Thank you if you'd like to support the show. All right. Well, we got a bit of a downer news, and this is not a surprise, but we kind of have to start the show with kind of just this part of it. It is now official per Formula One and FOM. Bahrain and Saudi Arabia are off of the calendar at the current time. There will be no F1 in April. So we're going to go to Japan in 2 weeks' time, at which point then we will take basically a 5-week break between, because the next race is, I think, the first weekend in May, and that'll be the Miami Grand Prix. The flyaways are still, other than obviously we all know what's going on in that part of the world. I just hope that this thing can get resolved as soon as it can. It sucks that we're going to lose 2 races. Bahrain can be fun. Saudi Arabia can be fun, but it's where they're located. It's not anything to do with those particular places other than just where they are and what's going on in that part of the world. And yeah, you got to be safe. You can't get the whole circus there and then have potential to have something really go wrong. Cody, any big thoughts on this? It just kind of sucks.
Much like every other F1 fan out there, I am sad that we're losing a couple races, and I'm sad that we're now getting our taste of Formula One and then not going to have any for the entire month of April, but definitely the right decision. You don't want to put anyone in potential danger over the sport. Yeah, hoping that, just same as you, hoping everything gets resolved as soon as possible. And maybe we'll be able to tack those on at the end of the year with the Qatar and Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't say canceled. It wasn't like when they did the COVID cancellation and they just said this Grand Prix is gone. And they didn't say suspended either. They kind of just said it's unable to happen in the month of April. So there was also supposed to be F2 and F3 and F1 Academy races. All of that is all kind of kiboshed for the moment. There was some talk that Saudi Arabia was trying to somehow wiggle their spot back on the calendar, given that where Jeddah is compared to where the hot zone of what's going on in the world isn't as close. Fact of the matter is, you couldn't risk it. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll obviously stay on this if things do develop. I was telling Cody earlier, I mean, this is kind of the FOM's only get out of jail free card. If they go under 22 races, so now we're going to have a 22 race season, at least as of now. If they go under that, they will not get their full share of TV money. So if there are any additional changes, I would bet to say that they would be looking much quicker for alternates or solutions. My guess is they really didn't have enough time to, get because you can't just throw a Grand Prix together in 20 minutes. Unfortunately, there's a lot of coordination and a lot of logistics that have to happen in order to make this work, especially one that has fans allowed in. In the COVID era, you really just had to get the cars and the teams, the drivers, and the few media people there, and you could do the event, and you were kind of fine. If you're having fans be allowed in, you've got to have food vendors and the clothing vendors, and everybody else has to find a way to get there and to be able to sell things. And just as a business venture, if you're in a country that you normally don't go to, that can take a minute. So I'm sure they tried to think about this, but unfortunately, at least for now, it looks like we're down to a 22 race season. All right, enough about that. We will now get into the Chinese GP that was, and there were a lot of sessions. We have a lot of things to cover. We will start with our headlines of the day. Cody, I'll let you go first here. What you got?
My headline is My heartstrings were pulled in so many different directions this time out. On the good side, you've got the fact that Kimi Antonelli got his first Formula One race win. It was a very emotional moment for him, which was just great to see. Also, pretty much got celebrated in what I think is the best possible way. He had Lewis Hamilton getting his first podium for Ferrari, and then you had Kimi, George, Lewis, and Peter Bonington all up on that podium to celebrate together. It was very heartwarming. That side of things was very nice, very good to see. Heartstrings being pulled in the other direction, though. Your guys, the McLarens, they didn't even get to start the race, and then my man Max Verstappen didn't make it to the end. So, a bad day for the Outlap F1 podcast people here, but a real good day if you're a fan of Mercedes or Lewis.
Yeah. I will start with the good side of this. And my headline of the day is you always remember your first one. You got to give a warm congratulations to Kimi Antonelli. I saw the tennis pro Yannick Sinner also gave him a very public congratulations after he won his ATP Tour event. Congrats to Kimi Antonelli on a well-earned victory, the first of his career in Formula One. He went out. He did not have a great sprint, but he pulled it back together. We'll talk about what he did in qualifying, how he pulled it back together, and then how he managed to keep it together in the race, despite having one heart-in-mouth moment near the end there that made everybody kind of stand up, but he got through it. He got himself across the line. That was good. The not so good were the fact that the unreliability bug that we had been kind of waiting for in this new set of regulations. We kind of got through Australia, and yeah, we knew the Honda thing was going to happen, and they had said that. So we were expecting that. We kind of got through that race, and we probably had better reliability. We probably got through most of the testing with better reliability than we quite frankly expected. But this being a sprint weekend is the first time you're taxing this entire package to its limits. And let's just be honest, there were a bunch of cars that went boom or bang or didn't start up, or we don't know exactly what happened. They make it to the grid, then they get pulled off the grid, and then they're in the garage and nobody can tell you why. We know it was bound to happen, but it all kind of happened here. It all kind of happened all at the same time, and all of our rooting interests kind of all went out the window. So I had to watch the race a second time so I could actually enjoy the Antonelli part of it, because my live watch was, well, a little not good, and I was a little peeved, and I basically got to the end of the race, and it was 4-something a.m. local time, and I went, I don't have anything intelligent to say. I'm going to bed now, because if I say anything, it's probably not all that great. But let's rewind. Let's go back. Let's talk about sprint qualifying. We'll talk about the actual sprint race itself. There is some things to really actually be interested in. I thought the sprint race was absolute bonkers, but we're going to talk about all that in just a little bit. But we shall start with the SQ qualifying, which saw, all right, we still haven't quite made it to 22 qualifiers yet. So we have our lowest finisher was P21. That was Valtteri Bottas in the Cadillac. P20 was Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. P19, Fernando Alonso, the other Aston Martin. P18 was Alex Albon in the Williams. P17, Carlos Sainz in the other Williams. So the teams that we kind of were expecting to struggle did so. P16 was Franco Colapinto. P15, Arvid Lindblad. P14 was Gabby Bortoletto. P13 was Ian Lawson. P12 was Esteban Ocon. P11 was Nico Hulkenberg just missing out on the sprint shootout. But P10 was Isaac Hadjar in the Red Bull. P9 was Ali Behrman in the Haas. He's having a great start to this young season. P8 was Max Verstappen. This was probably a shocker of qualifying. Hello, how you doing? Remember Pierre Gasly? Yeah, he loves this new car, I think. Up into P7 and SQ3. That was unexpected. P6, Charles Leclerc. That was probably not as expected. P5, Oscar Piastri. That's right about where you probably expect McLaren to be. P4 was Lewis Hamilton. The P3, Lando Norris puts together a lap and manages to get into the qualifying podium, as it were, of a P2 and P3. Kimi Antonelli in P2 and George Russell set the metronome, and here we go. 131.5 to sprint full time. All right. Cody, big thoughts in the sprint quali?
So right out of the gate here, and it was even apparent during the practice session, was that McLaren and apparently, Alpine as well, they're starting to figure out that Mercedes engine a little bit better in the sprint qualifying. The McLarens were much closer to the McLarens were much closer to the Ferraris, is what I was trying to get at there in terms of qualifying time. So good to see that they're starting to make their way up a little bit there. Still seeing those really big gaps in qualifying, though, from the front, George Russell, back to even just those McLarens and Ferraris. So still big gaps in the qualifying there. Watching qualifying sessions is still a little bizarre, as we've said before, because the drivers are not necessarily pushing the cars to their absolute limits like we're used to seeing in qualifying. But we are starting to see the development of the competitive order a little bit. The Mercedes power teams are moving up, which unfortunately means that Red Bull is falling behind relative to them. So yeah, Max Verstappen only in 8th place, Isaac Hadjar only in 10th for sprint qualifying, which was a little painful to see.
Yeah, I mean, Lauren Mickey's on the radio was literally apologizing and saying, we don't know exactly what went wrong, but we're bound and determined to try to fix it. That was at that point, but a really rough free practice session and a really rough sprint qualifying for both Red Bulls, for all of the Red Bull powered teams. So it wasn't like it was just the works team. The Racing Bulls did not get off the ground very well here either. And you did kind of see some progression, I think, with McLaren and definitely Alpine. I mean, Pierre Gasly's gotten his hands around that thing and is definitely pushing it to wherever it can go right now. That was probably the pleasant surprise, at least early on. But yeah, I mean, it was still, at the end of the day, I think it was over 0.6 of a second between the two Mercedes and everybody else. So the gap, it's better than 0.8. So we're chipping at it, but we're clearly still not all the way optimized. When we get to Grand Prix qualifying, I did see some overlays that are telling. Let's just put it this way. They're very telling in what I saw. There's a bit of hope if you're wearing this type of hat. It get dashed a little bit on Sunday, but there is hope. There is actual hope and things I saw in timing that made me go, huh. When you will tell you the result, and then I'll tell you why it's a little odd where they actually ended up where they were. But anyway, before we did that, we had the sprint. And the sprint, if you missed the sprint, this sprint was crazy. We'll just kind of tell you where everybody finished. And so here we go with that. All right. 3 non-classified finishers in the sprint. Those were Arvid Lindblad, Valtteri Bottas, and Nico Hulkenberg. And we finished with 19 cars. P19 was Sergio Perez. P18 finishing the sprint. This was actually, I think, progress for Aston Martin. 2 cars finished the sprint. Lance Stroll in P18 and Fernando Alonso in P17. You gotta say that's progress. P16 was Alex Albon. P15, Isaac Hadjar. P14 was Franco Colapinto. P13 was Javi Bortoleto. P12, Carlos Sainz. P11, unable to convert it into points with Pierre Gasly. P10 was Esteban Ocon. P9 just missing out on the points with Max Verstappen. The points finishers, P8, Ali Behrman, there he is again. P7 was Liam Lawson. P6, Oscar Piastri. P5, Kimi Antonelli. We will talk about his trials and tribulations in the sprint for sure. P4 was Lando Norris. P3, Lewis Hamilton. P2, Charles Leclerc. They were trying, but they could not get to the Mercedes at the end of the day. George Russell takes the sprint. At this point, it was 2 for 2. 2 races for 2. All right. Cody, big thoughts here in the sprint. There was actually quite a bit going on.
There was a lot that went on. Big thing is we are continuing to see as the commentators have been describing it, the yo-yo racing. The Ferraris are continuing to get off the line very well. And we're seeing a pattern here because we saw this in the sprint race. We're going to talk about it, that it happened even more in the Grand Prix. Ferraris are great off the line. They take the lead at the start, but the Mercedes have the better overall pace and are able to, with a little bit of yo-yoing back and forth, eventually able to make the overtakes and make them stick against those Ferraris. Kimi Antonelli had a little bit of a rough start to the races of this weekend. Trying to remember back, if I remember correctly, he ended up getting like a 10-second penalty,
Yeah,
right? That ended up being what killed his
he
position.
fell like a stone off the line. He ended up in, I think it was P8 or P9, collided with, I think it was Lindblad, and I think that's why
You're
Lindblad
right.
went out. And then he ended up getting a 10-second penalty for that. And then there was a later on safety car when Bottas stopped and Hulkenberg stopped on track. And I didn't realize you could clear a 10-second penalty under a safety car. Apparently you can, because he did.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that. He came in and they're like, "Oh, they can't touch the car." And I was thinking, "You really allowed to do that right now?" I mean, I guess it is really the way that you're supposed to serve a 10-second penalty. Just like you, I wasn't really 100% sure the rules on doing that on a safety car, but then ended up working out for them.
I actually
And
checked.
not quite
I
so bad.
got my question answered by a legit F1 paddock insider. Chris Medlin was gracious enough in the pre-race show to answer my question about that, and he did so. So thank you to Chris for confirming that was completely okay. I did also check it later on. You can clear a 5-second penalty or a 10-second penalty under a safety car. I did not know that. I thought that they had specifically put that in the rules so that you couldn't do that, but apparently I was wrong. So yeah,
You
that
were
was Antonelli's fun day. And then he had another little bit of a ding dong with Oscar Piastri late in the sprint. Piastri was accused of jumping the line to get by Antonelli after the end of the safety car. I hadn't really seen a definitive replay, but McLaren told Piastri to give the position back. Once he did so, Antonelli was too tough to catch at that point, so Piastri really couldn't do anything back, and so that's kind of how they ended up in that order. But yeah, a P5 recovery from the front row for Kimi Antonelli in the sprint. Yeah,
I did see the onboard of Oscar Piastri at that point in the race, and it was pretty cut and dry that he had
okay.
made that overtake before the line. So I have to imagine that his team, they looked at that and were like, yeah, we're not going to get away with that one. So ends up having to give that one back to Antonelli. You're talking about how he dropped like a stone at the start. It wasn't the only one that Max Verstappen, we've discovered that he is, at this point in time, not great with this car off the line. He did this in the sprint race. He did it again in the Grand Prix. He fell like a stone as well off the line. Ended up having, I guess, a decent recovery for the sprint race, but it was not enough to get into the points, which was unfortunate. I guess it was good to see, what the car could do against the rest of the midfield, but it wasn't enough to get past Oliver Behrman, who is continuing to look really good for Haas in all of our Grand Prix sessions so far. But yeah, it was a little sad to see Max get outdone by the sister team, by Liam Lawson finishing higher up there. Isaac Hadjar actually is better off the line, but he had some clumsy moments this weekend as well. So that's why he is all the way back outside the points, way down in fifth.
Yeah, the thing to note about these starts, and you talk about the Ferrari starts, and the thing that I noticed is it's of all they are good in the they're awesome in the first phase. I mean, they're getting off the line. I thought the Mercedes cars got better off the line. I think in Australia they both just they hit the button and nothing happened. And then you saw what Antonelli happened and nothing happened. Russell got to the first corner, but where that Ferrari is so good is in the second, and then I think the third and final phase of the start, where the momentum is still with it. And maybe it's just in how that thing is deploying off the line or whatever it's doing. But you can definitely see it. Mercedes tried to get better. They did, but it still wasn't enough.
So I guess the word on that with how they're getting off the line better is the Ferrari power unit physically has a smaller turbo unit. And so it spins up more quickly. It is able to produce that power off the line because of that. So we were only getting 5 seconds of spool up time for these engines at the beginning of the race. And some of the teams have been claiming that the appropriate amount of time to spool up that engine could be as much as 10 seconds for some of these power units. So 5 seconds is kind of where they met in the middle, and that just works great for that Ferrari unit. So it's getting that turbo boost right off the line. It's a big help for them at this point, where they need that little extra bit to keep it competitive with Mercedes, because without that off the line advantage, I think these first two races would have been really boring.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm going to date myself here, and I don't care because this is the video game reference that I have. And everyone has talked about Mario Kart and how these cars are kind of like that. And it's really true. The Ferraris are like the Yoshi. They get off the line quick, but they kind of peter out in that high top speed area. Your two Mercedes, that's Bowser. That's Bowser's car. Can't get off the line, but once he gets it going, that high top speed just kicks right in, and it's a monster coming for you, and you can just watch it on the timing. It's like, and then you see a couple of times where the Ferraris would start to race each other. And granted, it was nice to watch the wheel to wheel between Leclerc and Hamilton, and they were both going at it. Leclerc got a little bit testy because he kind of realized what was going on. But what we're doing this ding dong back and forth. What are they doing? They're driving down the road. That's where they went. So Russell just kind of said, thanks, guys. And poof, even though the end result wasn't necessarily as close, the safety car kind of helped with that, because what we're seeing, at least in the early pattern, is it's really close early. It's competitive early between the Ferraris and the Mercedes. But just as time goes on, whether it's tire wear deployment or that just high top speed edge that the Mercedes seem to have, they just have that little bit extra in the tank to get it done over a longer run. But I would say, if nothing else, I think two things I've seen, at least from this sprint. One, the guys are at least able to follow each other a little bit better. You don't have that huge wall of dirty air. So I think from a chassis standpoint, I think these cars are actually pretty fun. And what I would put that in the positive category. Now, if we could just get the energy deployment side to kind of kick up with that, I think you would see it more competitive longer with all the tools and stuff that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right. That's kind of my thought on the sprint, but I thought it was an entertaining sprint. The crowd was certainly liking it from everything that I saw. All right. So we will take not a quick break, but I'm just going to find my sound here. If I can type and do things. All right, it is playing, but it's playing at very low level. Turn it up a little bit. All right, so we then transitioned into the main GP qualifying, which saw, all right, our first session of the year that actually had all 22 cars actually participate. So P20 was Sergio Perez, P21 was Lance Stroll, P20 was Valtteri Bottas, P19 Fernando Alonso, P18 was Alex Albon, P17 Carlos Sainz, and P16 was Gabby Bortoleto. P15 was Arvid Lindblad, P14 Liam Lawson, P13 was Esteban Ocon, P12 was Franco Colapinto, P11 once again was Nico Hulkenberg, P10 was Ali Behrman, P9 was Isaac Hadjar, P8 was Max Verstappen, P7 yet again was Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, good showing there, P6 was Lando Norris, P5 Oscar Piastri, P4 was Charles Leclerc, P was Lewis Hamilton, out qualifying his Ferrari teammate there. And P2 and 1, a flip-flop from what we had seen. Kimi Antonelli has the bad sprint, rallies with some George Russell reliability issues creeping up to take the pole, a 132.06 for the lap time. All right. So I would call this kind of a more ho-hum qualifying till you got to Q3, and then a bit of all holy hell breaks loose because George Russell suddenly stops on track. Cody, what'd you see?
Yeah, he stops on track right at the beginning of Q3, and I was sitting here getting really excited because he hadn't set any competitive time yet, and he was practically stopped. So I was thinking, man, he's not going to set a time. He's going to be starting in 10th place. I'm sure he can make his way up through the field, but just having to do that is going to really put him at a disadvantage. And so we're going to see a much better chance of Ferraris getting out there and getting the win. Didn't end up happening that way. He did get in one lap time, and it was good enough for the front row. But since it was just the one lap time, he had to give it what he had there, and it was not enough just from the one run to compete with Kimi Antonelli. So Kimi Antonelli is, I believe they said, the youngest pole sitter ever, which is quite the feat. But other than that, really kind of more of the same as what we saw from the sprint qualifying. Really, everyone kind of ended up in about the same places, except the Ferraris did move up on McLaren. So you had it 2x2 for the front six, Mercedes, then Ferrari, then McLaren. Max and Isaac Hadjar are in pretty much the same places they were in sprint qualifying, right at the bottom of Q3. So they didn't really learn anything from the sprint race. And yeah, it was nice to see that at least everyone out there got to put in times. The people that we expect to see at the back were there at the back. I was impressed that Valtteri Bottas actually managed to outqualify a non-Cadillac car by outdoing Lance Stroll, and by some margin too. There it was about half a second. Sergio Perez, you gotta start trying to catch up to Valtteri there. Yeah, from this, it still was looking like Mercedes was in a league of their own.
Yeah. All right. So here's where I will give the non-Mercedes fans some hope with what I saw actually in the data. Because believe it or not, I was not able to watch this qualifying live. I had every intention of watching this qualifying live. I had put on a video that I thought was going to take an hour, and then I was going to turn on the pre-qualifying stuff. And the next thing I know, it's 4 hours later. There's some random thing playing on my television, and it's not qualifying. So, of course, when you don't want to know what happens and you try to be plugged
Yeah.
in, your phone tells you whether you want to know or not. Like, if you open your phone, it's going to take you to the app, and it's going to tell you. So I found out, okay, Lando Norris was 6th, Oscar Piastri's 5th. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of where I would expect it. And you look at the delta, and it's 0.4 of a second, so it got a little closer. But here's where I will give you hope. In the final Q3 run, and then I actually started looking at some social media, and I found there's an account out there that does a lot of data analysis with like practice times and qualifying times. I don't really like it when he does the practices, but I do like it when he does the qualifying because I think these are all everybody trying to push as hard as they can. It's called Lights Out. And this guy and I just happened to see it. It was like the third post that I scrolled up to. And he goes, in the ideal lap, the McLarens were the second fastest car in the ideal lap. They just didn't put all 3 sectors together each time. And in the final run, it's even more glaring. They're with the Mercedes through sector 1. They were with the Mercedes through sector 2 even. Within a 10th, it's the third sector where it all went wrong and it all dropped off. And it starts because you can just tell that Mercedes has got the fine-tuned deployment to get it over that long straight with the super clipping. And the McLaren just peters out when it goes into that turn 14 corner. And from then on, that's where all 4/10 come between after that hairpin and the run up to the line. That's it. But for 3/4 of that lap, the Ferraris were with him and the McLarens were with him. So that's where I would say, like, if you want hope for these rule sets and convergence and a fight for race wins, that's where it is. So I was buoyed by that. And then I would say until we get to Sunday. And you know what? I think I'm going to just not tweet out a buildup to the races anymore because the last 2 times I've tried to get excited, I hear, oh no, there's a McLaren problem. Last weekend was Oscar Piastri binning it into the wall. This weekend, even before any of the coverages had even started, I got a tweet in my feed from, I forget who it was, but I just heard, our issue with Lando's car, electrical, team say they're on it, they think he'll come out. So then, of course, me being me, I pull up the timing for the formation laps, which I normally don't even do. But I'm looking, and everybody else's names light up and go out, and there's Lando with Pitt next to his name, and it just doesn't move. And now I'm watching the pre-race, and now the story has come out. And, of course, they're counting it down, and 8 seconds, 7, he doesn't come out, so he's going to get a pit lane start. At least that's what we thought was going to happen. I'm like, well, fine. They bought themselves an extra 40 minutes. If he can get out, he'll probably cut through most of the field. He might finish in 8th. Okay, that's not the world's worst answer, and at least maybe we'll get to see some fun overtakes. Or so we thought. So the formation lap happens, he doesn't come out. And meanwhile, Oscar Piastri did manage to make it to the grid. He actually got into the car, and they tried to fire it up, and I hear on his radio something called Purple Default 4.8. And I went, wow, that's really deep into the menus. And he's flipping on the steering wheel and trying to do it. And the next thing I see is the camera goes blank, and then it pops back up, and they're wheeling him back to the garage. So not only did we lose one who never made it out, and we lost the other one who made it out, got to the grid, and then had something go kaputskis. Meanwhile, we also had, they were dropping like flies. Gabby Bortoletto's car makes it to the grid, has to come out. Alex Albon was going to start in the pit lane anyway. He never comes out. So before we even got started, you had 4 cars not make the start. It reminded me of Australia 2014, if I'm being honest, because we had that same problem then. And then further on in the DNF category, we had Lance Stroll, which was expected. He only made it 9 laps. Fernando Alonso actually tried to make it for a while. He made it a whole 32 laps, and then he called it quits. And then Max Verstappen was on for a pretty good day. I thought he was going to finish relatively in 6th, and then, his car goes bang. So our back markers are all the non-finishers plus 3 cars. Sergio Perez finished, Esteban Ocon finished, and Valtteri Bottas finished. So that's P4, 15, 14, and 13. Everybody else did not finish. The graveyard of very talented drivers here. Yuck. Cody, what were your thoughts?
My first thought was, God, McLaren just has the worst record so far with race starts because, we're only 2 Grand Prix in here, but out of their 4 Grand Prix entries so far, they've only started once, one car. You only got Lando Norris in Australia. Other than that, we had, the Oscar Piastri slams into the wall on the coming to the grid, and now technical issues for both of them. So yeah, only one start so far for them. So it's a little brutal, but they are at least getting faster. So you have that to look forward to once they actually, manage to get back to the grid.
Keep the car together for the formation lap. That would be nice.
The Max thing was painful again, because just like in the sprint race, he could not get off the line. He fell like a rock again, and then was having to fight his way back up through the field. Now, he did do a pretty good job. He made it all the way up to 6th place, but that was even kind of painful because I'm sitting here watching him like 2.2 seconds behind Oliver Behrman in a Haas, and that time was not shrinking. It wasn't changing at all. He was just stuck there for lap after lap after lap after lap after lap. And then he got up to 2 seconds, and I was like, ooh, maybe he's going to... Nope, it was right back down. So, yeah, the fact that the Red Bull cannot compete with Haas is pretty damning. I guess that, that's a really good thing for Haas. They're pretty clearly, at least in the hands of Oliver Behrman, best of the rest right now, which is really cool for them. But it makes Red Bull look really, really, really bad. So his car finally gives up the ghost about 3/4 of the way through the race, which put an end to a pretty awful weekend for Max. He was right back to, during interviews after the race, right back to saying, God, these cars suck. If you like what you're seeing, you don't understand racing, which I thought was maybe a little aggressive because, frankly, I actually thought this Grand Prix was pretty fun. Now, the way that it's being achieved is maybe a little weird, and some people have been calling it artificial, but it was really, really fun to watch the battles up front going back and forth throughout significant portions of the race. So, I'm not super thrilled with these regs, but I was pleased with the product, the racing product this weekend. So maybe that was a little too far.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the idea behind, like, if you were just sitting in a laboratory trying to figure out how do we make Formula One cars overtake, you could see why they kind of cooked this up, and you could kind of see how and where the thought process was, because there is this move and counter move, and I used up too much of my battery, therefore I'm a sitting duck. And it's not just DRS open, DRS pass, move done, no counter, this kind of stuff. You still do have your passes that are a product, I think, of the tire offset, but you do have, with some of these battles, especially from some of the cars that are on similar paces, you see attack but now you can also see defense for so many years in the DRS era. When we would say the DRS was too powerful, it was simply because if you got your car within a second, it wasn't even a fight. There was nothing you were going to do. You were basically better off of giving up the position, trying to get DRS back yourself on the next lap, and maybe trying to put in something if you could. But with this, there is an opportunity for an attack and a actually legitimate defense. That having been said, when you have a bunch of cars go bang and you're looking at your back markers with 3 cars in them, I don't know that that's good, but we kind of also thought, I kind of sit back and go, well, I think some of the unreliability bug has to be kind of just random stuff. The ones with the McLarens were not the same problem. So they made it a point of saying that whatever it was, we think it's on the power unit side, but we're not exactly sure what it is. We're going to investigate with Mercedes HPP, which is the engine division there, not the Formula One team, and figure out what the hell went wrong. And if the power units themselves can be salvaged, I bet it can. They still haven't, even a couple days after the race, have said definitively what it is. So the fact is, it was just something, from my perspective, the cars were fine on Saturday. They ran the sprint. They sounded fine. They ran the qualifying. I watched all the onboards when I caught up with qualifying. They sounded fine. There wasn't anything about it that made me think, it wasn't like it suddenly lost power and then they kicked back on. And then you're like, okay, well, they made it back home, but you're worried about it. There was no indication of any problem. There was no indication for Bortoletto either. He makes it to the grid. They go to sit back in the car and just something went awry. So it's a very complex, convoluted car right now that we have to try to figure out. And we've seen this stuff before. You remember back in 2014 and 2015, if you had to change your engine, if you had your engine go bang in FP1, you were done for the day. There was no way you were getting back out for FP2. If you had something go wrong in FP3, there was no chance you were coming off of qualifying. And then as the years went down and as these people the engineers got their arms around how this stuff worked and what to fix and how to fix it, you had a full-on engine changes, full-on things that would happen within that 2 hours between FP3 and qualifying. So we went from an 8-hour process to a 2-hour process. So this will get better because it has to. Because if it doesn't, we got a major problem. But it's just it's just one of those random things. Sometimes car racing can suck. And
yeah,
that
I
was
think
kind of my thought on it at the end.
We all got maybe a little too excited by the high reliability rate from testing. And yeah, now we're seeing that when it comes down to an actual competitive weekend and you have to do things on a time crunch that, a lot of things are going wrong. I'm not ready to damn it in that category yet because like you just said, it's going to get better over time. I still think that, it'll be cooler if they get these cars to a point where they've got enough energy to deploy to really actually push the car to the limit.
Right.
That would be really nice. And who knows, maybe they'll get so honed in on, ability to recharge and deployment that, or, maybe they'll be allocated a little bit more of each of those. Maybe they'll get it to a point where it really isn't this struggle to push the car over a whole lap. Maybe I'm just dreaming, but we'll see. One last thing before we move on from the back markers is due to the high rate of attrition for this race, we did end up with a little bit of a wacky thing where you got a Cadillac from Valtteri Bottas finishing all the way up in 13th, which, considering we're not really anticipating Valtteri or Sergio scoring any points this season, unless we get another race with a really, really high rate of attrition where Cadillacs finish, their inter-team battle might be done at the second race of the year, which is kind of funny to say. But yeah, I just thought that little statistic could get a little funny by the end of the year.
Well, it's also not insignificant for the team standings because even though you're at 0 points, your highest non-point finish becomes your tiebreaker. So Valtteri Bottas now has a P13. None of the Aston Martins are anywhere close to a P13. And if I recall right, and I will want to check this, is it still only the top 10 that get prize money, or did they give prize money to everybody?
I think they give prize money to everybody.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought maybe they gave it back because I remember back in like 2012 in HRT days, that was a big thing at the end of the year was what was your highest non-point finish? Because if you were outside of that top 10, now it's still a differential in some millions of dollars, but at least you'll get something. But Aston Martin, that's actually a pretty hard climb to make given where they are right now. Trying to overcome now a P. That's good for Cadillac. They may not finish last this season, and they probably did not have any aspirations other than just trying to finish races. So good for them. Like we kind of mocked at it last week where we said, the Cadillacs finished, so that was an accomplishment. No, the Cadillacs finished. That was an accomplishment. All right, so we'll move into the midfield. P12 was Arvid Lindblad. P11, again, just missing out on the points. Nico Hulkenberg is kind of your early candidate for the hard luck. He is now, I think, inherited the Yuki Tsunoda Award for P11, at least early on this season. A P10, Franco Colapinto had himself a very interesting race. Well, we will definitely have to talk about that, but he comes home in P10. P9, a team that needed some help and got it in a crazy kind of frantic with everybody else not finishing. If you could finish, you can get in the points. Carlos Sainz and Williams get 2 points. That's big for them, especially early. P8 was Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bull. P7, or Isaac Hadjar in the Red Bull, excuse me. P7 was Liam Lawson in the Racing Bulls, excuse me. P6, Pierre Gasly. Big thing for Alpine here. P5, again, we're saying best of the rest by far in kind of a league of his own right now is Ali Behrman in the Haas. Because that's really kind of where I think we should kind of stop with the midfield because the top 4 are kind of our podium at this point. But Ali Behrman is just having himself a great start to this season. Haas are looking great. They are taking advantage of the Ferrari power unit, and they're clearly more caught up than all of the Mercedes customer teams bet. But what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I don't know what it is with Haas right now because they don't have that Mercedes superpower unit. Although we are seeing from the Ferrari team that maybe their power unit really isn't that bad either. It's just different. And yeah, Haas is really making it work, especially in the hands of Oliver Behrman. I haven't seen quite as much success from Esteban Ocon yet. And, we didn't really talk about it in the back markers, but he had a bit of a rough spot in his race as well. So Oliver Behrman holding off everyone at the end, keeping the distance between Max, as I said before. If we're going over to the Esteban Ocon, this kind of ties into what you're talking about with Franco Colapinto's very interesting day. There was, I'm trying to see if I remember this correctly. So there was an early safety car.
Correct.
And Franco Colapinto was one of the cars that stayed out. So
this was the Lance.
Yes, Lance Stroll tires are most everybody pits, but there are a couple cars that stay out, and they ended up jumping up the field. And kind of interestingly enough, it actually helps out Kimi Antonelli that a little bit more because there's now a couple of midfield cars that are in between Antonelli and the charging George Russell and Ferraris. Franco Colapinto, once those front runners got by him, he did a pretty awesome job. It's got to be said for a lot of that race, holding up cars behind him. Every time they cut over to him, there were people trying to make overtakes on him, and he was doing his damnedest to keep them back there, which was really good to see because, I think Franco Colapinto hasn't really had a whole lot of opportunity to shine yet. So it was good to see him doing well there. And he does end up getting that point at the end of the race. You got to wonder if maybe it could have been even just a little bit better for him because during one of the pit stop sequences, Esteban Ocon was coming out of the pits. Or no, was it Ocon or Colapinto coming out of the pits? I don't really remember. And that part isn't the important part. The important part is someone was coming out of the pits, heating up their tires, and Esteban Ocon and Colapinto end up coming together, going into one of those early turns, and it was not a good move by Ocon. He made a very opportunistic move up the inside, pretty much lost control of the car during the move and collided with Colapinto pretty hard. Fortunately for them, they were both able to continue the race. But this was one of those rare moments where who was at fault was so cut and dry that even over the radio,
Ocon admitted it.
Ocon's always like, yeah, that was totally my bad. No, I got to hand it to him. There's a lot of pretty egregious incidents in Formula One where still the driver, who's pretty clearly at fault, still says, "What the fuck happened there?" Excuse my French.
He pushed me off.
Yep.
Even though I cut him off.
I got to hand it to him on that one, being like, yeah, that one's on me.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you could clearly tell. And I think it was probably one of those Ocon pushed the button and then instantly regretted it and went, I would have loved to have seen, like, if he actually said anything in the car while he was doing it, because it looked like he pushed it and went, shit, this is going to be bad. This one's going to hurt. And then sure enough, they collided. And then to be magnanimous enough to say, yeah, this was my fault was refreshing, if nothing else. So he took his medicine. That's why he was down there. He'd been having himself not a bad race. It was interesting. I don't know if you were watching the Sky coverage. They always interview a team principal. They were interviewing one of the Alpine guys. And this was right after the safety car. They checked in with him and he's like, well, right now we're doing really well, Crofty. We're in P2 and I'll take it wherever I can get it. It was literally what he said. And I'm like, well, hey, you got to make your hay when you can. So yeah, I think the McLaren's being out, one of the Williams being out, and all of the reliability leads to opportunities for some of these midfield teams to score and score big. Let's took advantage of it. They sit P4 in the constructors. They are 1 point behind McLaren, which is, who would have thought of that at the beginning of this season? But yeah, I mean, these guys actually put together a really nice fight in the midfield. It was actually fun to watch because these guys are as close. Like I said, this is kind of how you can see what these regs were supposed to do when they work. We just have to get them fine-tuned just a wee bit there.
On the flip side of that, though, once things get fine-tuned to the extreme, you might not see racing quite like this anymore. So, we don't really know. It could be that we get to a point where everyone is deploying at exactly the same parts on the track and you stop seeing this kind of ability to overtake and re-overtake and
that's true.
Go back and forth. A couple other small bits in the midfield here. We did see Arvid Lindblad kind of come back down to earth a little bit after the Australia race where he was making some pretty daring moves. He did finish outside the points in a lap down this time out. Isaac Hadjar, again, much better off the line than Max. Unfortunately for him, though, he had a spin on his own early on in the race and managed to recover for some points here, which right now Red Bull could really use. So it's good. It's good that he made that recovery. But they have a lot of ground to make up if they want to be considered one of those big four front runners here by the end of the season.
Yeah, and also good shout out for Liam Lawson, a guy
Mhm.
who's kind of been put through the ringer. Good solid P7. That is a good building block, I think, for him. All right, so we'll move into our top four because this was the ding dong that everybody saw. We saw kind of a repeat of the sprint: wash, rinse, sprint, repeat. And here we go again. The Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton dueled. The Mercedes for a while, dueled each other for a while, but ultimately it is Lewis Hamilton who comes out on top. He gets his first podium, official Grand Prix podium in Ferrari colors. He was very happy to see it. A P2. He would probably call this a damage limitation weekend, especially after the Q3 drama that he had. George Russell had to fight for it, had to do some moves to get around those Ferraris. He was definitely not the smooth, easy, calm, cool, collected guy we heard in Australia, where, he was just sitting back and loving life. The guy who was sitting back and loving life for most of this race, Kimi Antonelli. Every time George and the Ferraris would fight, it just meant Kimi Antonelli could stay on that optimum deployment and just kind of race off into the distance. And so he did, to the tune at the end of 5. I think when Russell finally got around, I saw the timing. It was like 7.5 seconds. I went, yeah, he's not going to catch that. He does get it down to 5.5. Some of that was Antonelli's own doing. He did have a bit of a scare there with about 4 laps, I think, to go. All of a sudden, the timing comes down, and I go, ooh, did he have an off? And then they showed the replay. He had it off. And it's a good thing that there was enough runoff area. It's a good thing they sometimes have MotoGP and motorcycle races in China. Because if that's a gravel trap, we might not be talking about a first-time winner, but he is the next one to be a first-time winner in Formula One. Congratulations to Kimi Antonelli, or Kimi Räikkönen, as they announced him when he came out on the podium.
Is that what they did? I
They
missed that part.
actually did. When the dude announced it, they came out to Kimi Räikkönen, and then everybody just kind of went, what? And then he quickly caught himself and said, Antonelli!
Yikes, I must have missed that. Maybe that's why he was why they were all kind of looking around and laughing about it. But
Yep.
it did end up being a pretty nice cruise to victory for Antonelli. So off the line, the Ferraris are good again. Lewis Hamilton manages to get up front and lead one lap. At the one lap that really separated Kimi Antonelli from getting a Grand Chelem for his first race win. That would have been something. But yeah, on the second lap, Antonelli makes it back by, and he ended up with it. It looked like, George was going to maybe have a shot at the win at first, at least a shot at really competing for it. But after that Lance Stroll induced safety car, the tires on George Russell's car or deployment or something, he was not doing very well right after the safety car period. It took a little while for him to really get going again. And that allowed the Ferraris to get ahead of the midfield traffic that was now in front of them, the guys that stayed out. And then it ended up being this pretty awesome duel between Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton for most of the race. They were fighting with each other. You knew that the podium was pretty much on the line there, and they both wanted it real bad. And it was really fun to watch them go back and forth. One leads one's ahead one lap, one's ahead the other lap. The whole time that they're doing this, like you said, Antonelli's getting farther ahead. George is kind of stuck behind them for a while until finally things calm down enough that he is able to pick them off one at a time. But then even after he got by them, which took some effort, then the Ferraris went right back at it. And it looked for a little while like Charles Leclerc had won the battle and was going to be the guy to get the podium. But then he had a pretty rare mistake where he went too deep into a corner. Lewis got by and was pretty much able to maintain it at that point for the rest of the race. But it was the highlight of the race for me, was watching Hamilton and Leclerc duke it out for most of the race. This did result in a very heartwarming podium celebration because you've got Kimi super excited to get the first win. Some really nice things said by Toto Wolff over the radio. You got Antonelli in tears during his interview, which was, kind of really tugging up those heartstrings again. And then, up on the podium, they had Peter Bonington accepting the trophy for the team. So you've got Lewis back up there reunited with him. I guess Lewis takes pretty kindly to Kimi Antonelli, and George Russell has been teammates with both of them. So it was pretty much the perfect formula for a really nice podium. they looked like they were having a blast up there. So that was definitely really nice to see.
Yeah, no, I think that to me was the highlight of the race for me was actually the aftermath of it. To see Kimmy's dad was actually a pretty cool moment. To see the guy screw up his name, which was just kind of
Yeah.
just a funny moment. Yeah, you just sat back and wait a minute. I heard what I thought I heard.
That
You get
explains
it.
some of our that explains one of our fan emails, because I was reading that earlier before the show and was like I know there's a joke here, but I don't get it.
Yeah, no, but that's why. But yeah, I mean, for a guy who up until this point of the season had really had a rough go of it. I mean, as much as Mercedes are clear of the field, the starts he's had were not good. I mean, he was 0 for 3 or 0 for 2. The Australia start not good by any stretch, and the one in the sprint clearly not good, and ended up lucky that he didn't damage his car enough to where he could still keep going after he collided with, I think, Lindblad in the sprint. But just, yeah, a full kind of redemption arc weekend for Kimi Antonelli. And now there's maybe a championship discussion here between the two of them. It's not going to be George Russell romping off into the distance. He may do it in the next few rounds. We don't know that.
Yeah,
But
we're
at
only on
least,
race 2.
right. I mean, but at least when you look at the points, it's a question. You can actually ask it and not sound dumb. That it's going to actually we may actually have now the same thing that happened with the McLarens, the same thing that happened when it was Lewis and Nico. Now the pendulum swings back to Toto Wolff and his management style. We've got two drivers, obviously, with an opportunity to go for a world championship. How do they manage it if this ends up evolving into that? And it's going to take some rounds later down the line. Obviously, for right now, there is no hint of any team interference of anything. And I have a funny feeling they're going to be so far clear in the constructors that you're going to have kind of the same question. What do they do with their drivers? What do Ferrari do to their hard charging drivers who are not giving each other any quarter? Because that could have easily ended up in tears. I think my text to you was Kimi Antonelli ought to go give a big old Italian kiss to both Leclerc and Hamilton, because it was their fighting that let him just go romp off into the distance at the end
But
there.
it was really nice to see, because despite the fact that they were fighting really hard with each other throughout the whole race, they did not wreck each other. They, there was a little close at times, kind of.
There was one time I think they did touch.
Yeah, they were right on the limit there, but they were, I think, being about as fair as you can to each other in a wheel-to-wheel race. And, it's good that they trust their drivers, at least right now. All it takes is one incident to turn that around. But right now, they're trusting their drivers to handle it out on the track. And I think you were going to see Mercedes finish this one 1-2, even if Ferrari wasn't really fighting as aggressively between the two of them. But I think maybe that's part of why they're doing that right now, is because there isn't a clear, we're only 2 races in, so, limited data, but there isn't really a clear dominant force between Leclerc and Hamilton, as opposed to last year, where Hamilton was struggling quite a bit. So it's good to see the even playing field there. It's good to see a little bit of the evening of the playing field between the two Mercedes drivers, because after Australia, I was like, God damn, we're going to see George Russell win 22 out of 24 races and break every record that Max just set, and it's not going to be any fun. So Antonelli getting this win, it does show that there's a chance. Now, George is more experienced and is pretty rock solid consistent, whereas Antonelli is, got to work on that area of his driving. He's definitely more prone to mistakes. We saw that even in this race winning drive of his, that he still made a mistake at the end that, like you said, a less forgiving track could have spelt doom. It was quite the lockup too. Nice squealer, lots of smoke.
Oh no, he got his money's worth. He definitely got his money's worth out of that one.
So,
all of a sudden you see 3 seconds on the timing disappear, and went, ooh. And then when I saw it, I went, oh no, he had it off. He had it off. Scary
on the other
moments.
side of that, though, despite being more prone to mistakes, now that he's gotten the win, there's a lot of confidence that's going to come with that. The knowledge now, he has it proven that I can do this. I can win the race, and I can beat George. So it's all to play for now. They're very close in points, so it could go anywhere from here, and I look forward to seeing that.
The hope is that this is game on, between the two of them, and that they can mix it up amongst themselves. And then if you're a team that's chasing, maybe they have a coming together and you can make opportunities but anyway, I mean, even if they don't, if it's just as good hard racing like you saw from the Ferraris, that's entertaining and fun to watch. And you're going to see two cars that are on equal footing do the same dance, like, and how do they hold up and who comes out on top of that? Because they're both on the younger side. And the other thought I had was, boy, we've seen Kimi Antonelli come a long way from that horrible wreck in Monza when he first got into an F1 car. So
Yeah.
That's good to see too. All right. Well, those were all of these sessions. There was a lot to dissect here in the Chinese Grand Prix. We are going to take a quick break. We will come back. We'll re-rack. We will tell you what this did to all of the standings. They are dramatically different from what we are used to seeing. We'll do the top 10 of the drivers. We'll recap where the teams are. We'll then open it up to your thoughts in the fan email segment. We've got some good contributors here. We'll hand out some awards, talk a little bit about predictions. We thought we were going to do better. We've got this backwards. The races we thought we were going to suck at, we did pretty good. This one, we thought we were going to do better, and it turned out not to be quite so good. But anyway, we'll talk about that. And then we'll preview a little bit of Japan, because that's the next stop in a couple weeks. So come on back. You will not want to miss it. All right, welcome back in. This is season 8. This is episode number 4. If we didn't mention that before, we are up to episode 4 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2026 Chinese GP review. You've got Andy on along with Cody tonight. And actually, after talking about that race, I actually feel better about it than I did when we first started. I was doom and gloom from my own team and my own fandom, but I actually feel better about things in general now. Kind of talked it out, as we are apt to do on this show. All right. So where did the Chinese GP, where did that do to all of the driver and the constructor standings after round 2 of our now 22 round Formula One season? All right, Cody, if you take the top 10 drivers, I will handle the teams. What do we got?
Our top 10 drivers are led by George Russell still for Mercedes. Had a good run so far of a first. So he's sitting on 51 points. However, Kimi Antonelli has made up a little bit of ground on him this weekend. Kimi is in second, and the other Mercedes at 47 points. Next two are going to be Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Only a point between the two of them. A little bit of a gap behind the Mercedes there, though. So Charles is sitting on 34 points, and Lewis is sitting at 33 points. Another little gap down to Oliver Behrman, sitting in 5th place for Haas at 17 points, and he's actually 2 points ahead of Lando Norris, who wasn't able to get out of the garage this time out. So Lando's sitting there on 15 points. Pierre Gasly, also one we're a little surprised to see quite this high up. Gasly is 7th place for Alpine at 9 points, which actually puts him a point ahead of Max Verstappen in 8th place. Saying that makes me want to throw up a little bit. And he is tied on points with one of the drivers from the sister team. That's Liam Lawson in 9th place for Racing Bulls, also on 8 points, but in 9th behind Max due to position count back. And then 10th place wrapped up by Arvid Lindblad, who has 4 points to his name in the other Racing Bulls.
Yes, the Brits being very well represented in our top 10. 5 of the 10 drivers are from the Great British Empire, as it would be. All right, our team standings. This is no surprise at this point. Mercedes, I think, have all but maxed out the points to this point. They are on, I think it's been 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Or
1-2, 1-2, 1-5.
Yes.
In the sprint.
Yes,
so
that's the only reason why.
4 points.
Yes, I was going to say the most you can get was 102. There are only a few points off that. They are up to 98 points in a great start to the season, obviously, for them. P2, no surprise here, is Ferrari. They are up to 67 points. P3, thank God for the sprint, I guess. McLaren keeps P3 just and only just because of their performance in that sprint. They are up to 18 points. P4, other team that's just having a great start to the season, is Haas F1. They are up to 17 points. P5, 5 points clear of Red Bull Racing. This was not where we would expect them to be at this stage either, only with 12 points. P6, they are tied with Racing Bulls. Their sister team are also on 12 points there. P7 is Alpine on the strength of Pierre Gasly's great effort, and Franco Colapinto coming home in the points are up to 10 points on the season. That is half their total from last year. So they've 2 rounds in. They're on pace probably to quadruple their point total from last year, if nothing else. P8, That would be Audi. They are on the board with 2 points on this young season. P9 is Williams. Carlos Sainz, like I said, those are significant points for Williams, man. They get off the schneid and come up to P9 with 2 points there. P10 is Cadillac on count back because of Valtteri Bottas's P, which leaves Aston Martin. Sadly, we know what their issues are. They've not been able to complete a race distance yet, but they remain also on 0 points in P11 in our constructor standings. All right, so you've heard our takes on what we saw in the Chinese GP. It is now time for our Fanny Mail segment. We've got our regulars here. Rachel Fleming, once again, you are such a trooper. To get up at, I think it was 2-something in the morning to watch the sprint. Again, phenomenal stuff. We love your dedication. And we love the fact that you DM right after the race. It's always good to kind of get your perspective on it. Sometimes throws me back into analyst mode as opposed to fanboy mode when I'm watching these things live. But anyway, Cody, what do we have here in the fan email segment?
All right. Our first one comes in from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, so that was a decent race, but I'm not 100% convinced, I am 100% convinced that neither of you guys liked it that much since it was Max out and McLaren double DNS. Yeah, that's pretty brutal, the double DNS. You don't see that a whole lot. So I'm thinking you were actually probably in a worse mood than me.
First time since the Indianapolis 2005, that infamous race where they specifically didn't start. That's the last time McLaren had a double DNS. So I'll take it like it better be another 30 years before it happens again. That's all I'm going to say.
She goes on to say, Kimi showed his maturity and his craft. It shows George will not romp to the title at all. Hamilton finally gets a podium. And if he didn't this season, it would be retirement for sure. Silly move by Ocon on Colapinto. We did talk about that one a little bit. I wonder if Ocon is feeling the pressure with Behrman doing so well because Ocon has not impressed this season so far. Colapinto is my hero of the race. Great effort all around. Williams points, more than I thought they would get this season. Yes, they were helped by some big names out of the race. We've got our watches now. Alonso watch clashed with Perez and then had to retire the car because of the nerves in his hands were being destroyed. He will retire at the end of the season. This is a fair guess. Perez watch, not good all weekend. Bottas had the beating of him, and there might just be a minor argument that Perez coming back may have been a mistake. There are only 2 races in, and they are in pretty much the worst car as expected. I'm not really quite sure to throw Perez back to the Wolves just yet, but we'll see how these next few ones go.
So we've gone from the want to kick Sergio Perez to the curb tour to the last year, the Sergio Perez apology tour, to now we're back to kicking him off to the curb again. How quickly your fortunes can change in this sport, man.
Yeah, it's Perez is either you're all in or you're all out. It seems as if bad. Last couple points from Rachel. Audi watch. Bort didn't start and Hulk didn't have the pace to get any points. I really hope that we keep going with those nicknames, Bort and Hulk, for the rest of the season. Now on to Japan. Will we get 22 cars to start the race? If we start from that very last point, no, I don't think we're going to get all 22 cars starting the race. We had 4 that didn't start the race this time out. So I think from the small amount of data that we have, I think it's almost a given that we're going to have at least one car have some kind of tech struggles before the race actually gets going. What are you thinking?
Well, one, I have to tag Rachel and share her a video. I don't know if she has ever seen an episode of The Simpsons, and again, I will date myself with this one because it's a very old episode and I don't care. But there is a part of it's a Jurassic Park parody, and they're in the gift shop, and Bart is looking for the personalized license plates, and he's going down the thing, and he goes, "Here's Bert, Barry, Bort. Who is named Bort?" And he's looking for Bart, and then the kid goes, "Mommy, buy me a license plate." And she goes, "No, come along, Bort." And then another random guy goes, "Were you talking to me?" He goes, "No, my son is also named Bort." So I saw that. I about broke. So, Rachel, you are getting a personalized thing from me. I will share that clip with you, and I'm never going to not think of you now every time I see that clip in The Simpsons. So thank you. That's the internet just working right there. A lot of the other points are very solid, as always. I mean, yeah, we do get one. We know George is not going to romp, at least to the title, at least early. Be interesting to see if this turns into a challenge. He will gain confidence from it. The hope is that confidence doesn't lead to arrogance and lead to maybe more mistakes. That we got to see, and that will be the fascinating and good part of this season. I agree. It was good to see Lewis Hamilton finally get a podium. I've been screaming that it's been all about this year when everybody was going crazy about last year. I kept saying, guys, 2025 is just gravy for him. It's all about this season and it's all about this regulation. And I think we're seeing that come to fruition there. I agree. Ocon is probably feeling the pressure. It seems it's just I think the younger the driver is, the more they are more apt to get this whole deployment thing a little earlier. Ocon being in the sport for a while has looked like he struggled with it a little bit, despite the car, I think, being pretty darn solid. Yeah, as far as your Alonso watch and your Perez watch, Alonso very well might be leaning towards a retirement. This has got to be super frustrating. He goes to Aston Martin where he wants to be the favored child and the prized son, and he gets Adrian Newey, and that whole Aston Martin program looks like it's so ready to just take that step, and it just hasn't come together. And you got to wonder how many more times can he try to rescue the car from the back one more time. At some point, you're just going to kind of have your fill, and maybe he certainly doesn't need to be trying to hurt his hands. And you could see there's an onboard of him on one of the straights, and he's literally letting the wheel go. Like, it's so bad, he has to let the car is going 200 something plus kilometers an hour, and you're letting the steering wheel go. What does that tell you about what he's going through?
He did say something funny in an interview recently when that was all coming out, that there was potential for them to damage their hands. And he was like, well, yeah, after about like 20 laps, it starts to get annoying and your hands start to go a little numb. But if we were a race winning car, I could drive this thing for like 4 hours. I was like, tells it like a real racing driver.
Well, yeah, but there's nothing in it. Like, I mean, if you're not learning anything more and you've gotten your data, you might as well kind of call it a day and save your hand, because that's like, look, I mean, that's going to be with you for the end of it. If you do screw up and have nerve damage, that doesn't come back. So I get why we want to make sure we're being safe there. But yeah, I don't know if we're going to see 22 cars start a race for a few rounds. Me and I have been kind of talking about this off camera, but this break that we've been knowing was coming may give some of these teams an opportunity, because it's not going to be a full shutdown. It's not like a summer break where the teams go away. No, teams are going to be working. So maybe that could be, like, for the regs in general, the best thing that could happen, because you're going to see probably a lot more development stuff get brought to the track maybe earlier than it otherwise would have, because they're going to be able to dedicate themselves to it. You're not going to have the logistical battle of getting all the equipment everywhere. That may be the tonic that's needed if your team is kind of a little bit on the back foot right now.
All right. Thank you, Rachel, for your email. Our next one comes in from Dave Doherty. Thank you, Dave. And he says, hi, team. What were your thoughts of the Ferrari? Is this their season? Also, your thoughts on Gasly's race, and lovely to see Kimi winning his first race. Yeah, we're all, I think, united on the front of being very happy for Kimi Antonelli. It's always a good feeling and very refreshing to see a driver get their first race win. So all things good there. As far as the Ferrari goes, they look very, very good. I would not go so far as to say it's their season. All signs point to it being Mercedes' season until someone can make a big step and actually challenge that. But Ferrari are definitely the closest. I really think they're not too far off from a race win this year. They just need to either end up at a track that favors their setup a little better, or maybe a little help on the reliability front, something along those lines, or, a step up in performance. We said before the season got going here that these cars are going to be upgraded at a pretty rapid pace as these teams are finding out just how well their cars work in the real world and collect all of that real world data to send back to test out in the wind tunnel and all that. So we're going to see these cars change a lot, and their performances improve significantly by the end of the season. They are a little handicapped on the rate that they can do that with the engines. And I guess it's going to be kind of interesting to see what they do with the engine upgrades, because the first window where they were going to evaluate performance between the power units and allow for potential upgrades was going to be after the first 6 race weekends. And now we're going to lose out on 2 of those. So I guess, are we going to still see that evaluation after the Miami Grand Prix then?
I believe so. I believe for that purpose, they're sticking to it's the timeline. They didn't want They didn't want engine manufacturers to have to go spend money that they didn't necessarily have to. So they were going to do that evaluation period. Yeah, you're going to have 2 less data points to go off of it, but I still think it's just the timing of it and the fact that if you're going to do it, they want to get it in to where it could still matter for the season.
Mhm.
So I think they're going to stick. What I've read on that is they're going to, at least for now, they're going to stick to that timeline.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good thing, because then you might actually, depending on who is eligible to get those engine upgrades, you might actually see things close up without quite the stark points gap having been established, or at least not quite to such an extreme degree. I think it's like, to be eligible for one engine upgrade, you need to be more than 2% off of the top power unit.
It's
And then if
plus
you're
2%. And then if it's plus 4%,
you get 2
you
upgrades.
could get it N plus 1, which would be normal update plus a second one.
Okay.
So it's kind of like the MotoGP system a little bit, to where like if you're a struggling power unit, you get more. It's not quite the token system that we used to have from way back when, but it's kind of like that, where you get an additional bite at that apple, or you could have 2 windows to do updates for performance.
Okay. So that'll be good. With Ferrari not being that far off, if they can really take advantage of the power unit upgrade and hone in their aerodynamic package a little bit, we could see it get closed up and be really tight every weekend, which I would be really, really excited about. But they got to nail those upgrades. And we've kind of seen in the past Ferrari start off the seasons really well and then kind of fade as time goes on, and they kind of fall behind in the development race. So hopefully they're ready to take care of that this time out.
Yeah, I've got an early candidate where if you're a Ferrari fan, particularly if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, circle this date. Monaco, baby. Because with that start, they could easily get around the Mercedes, even if they get out qualified. The qualifying might not mean anything in Monaco for the first time in a long time. And I don't think there's enough oomph to where, the high top speed or the deployment from the Mercedes can come back at them. So that actually sets up to be a very fascinating race, I think, this season.
Yeah, we were actually talking, Andy and I were talking a few days ago about how Monaco could be the race that stands to benefit the most from these regulation changes, because it won't all be about qualifying necessarily. And you might benefit from having more places around the circuit where you can pass, because with the last couple generations of cars, there really wasn't nowhere to pass at Monaco. Cars are too big, dirty air makes too big of a difference. And so that's going to be, a really fascinating race to see how it is affected by this generation of cars and the electrical deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. We also we've touched on Pierre Gasly. I think he's having a great start to the season. He's kind of making everybody remember, hey, remember me, which is very important. And he's been dragging that Alpine into places that it hasn't been in a while. And my God, Flavio actually looks happy for a minute. It was actually like kissing Franco Colapinto, and not in an ironic way either. It was good to see. So, I mean, for a team that has struggled, and, they definitely, it looked like the power unit just needed to be changed. And maybe now that team can actually start to get themselves out and figure out where they're going to go. Interesting things going on behind the scenes with Alpine, because one Christian Horner had put in a bid to maybe take an ownership stake in Alpine, and that's been countered by one Toto Wolff for the same stake and more money. At this point, he's managed to get more financing to maybe take over an ownership stake in Alpine too. Alpine is a Mercedes customer team. Could they become like a Racing Bull sister team type thing? Toto Wolff is definitely feeling himself, and he, it's a good chance to stick it to his old friend Christian Horner. There would be an interesting thing. The other rumor I'm also hearing is Horner to Aston Martin is not dead as a doornail right now either.
I think that just goes to show that it's not just on track or in Drive to Survive. I think Toto Wolff and Christian Horner just really, really hate each other's guts. And Toto will do everything in his power to make it difficult for Christian Horner to make his way back into Formula One.
Yeah, no, definitely stuff going on. And I read that and I just kind of go, ooh. And we all know right now, if you're Toto Wolff, you're feeling yourself a little bit. You've come back into the spotlight. You're all good. Your team is it look like it's clicking on every level right now. And why not feel yourself just a little bit there? But yeah, interesting to see if anything develops there. That'll be something we'll be watching for Off the Track for sure.
All right. Thank Dave for your email. And our last one comes in from John. Yes, that John. And John says, this was a fun race to watch. Congratulations to Kimi Räikkönen, apparently, and to the great Bono. Epic to see Kimi, Bono, and Sir Lewis on the podium together. A little bit of fun try there. Also, Lewis reminds us yet again that he's one hell of a wheel-to-wheel racer when his car isn't a bouncing tractor. F1 is blessed beyond measure to have him as their elder statesman. It will be interesting to see what he and Charles can do once the compression advantage is leveled out. For McLaren, man, what a day in all the wrong ways. I'm genuinely curious how pissed off Mercedes customers teams are not getting the PU playbook from the start. And lastly, I've been searching the internet high and low for all of the expert Drive Survive fans who spent 4 years religiously preaching that Max could win championship in any car on the grid because he was that good. Sadly, I couldn't find a single one of them today. Real shame. Yeah. Yeah, I
Maybe
gotta
I'll
agree
go.
with
Maybe I'll go first on this one.
Go for it.
I may go first on this one. Well, a lot of sentiments I agree with here, and it's good to hear from John. And it's been great. We've been kind of texting back and forth. We've been trying to rekindle our F1 relationship here, and it's been good to reconnect with him. And he's probably in a much better spot watching his guy get back to the podium. It's been a bit of a long road, so I understand what it is to have frustrating seasons. I totally get that. I think it was a fun race to watch. Overall, at the end of the day, once they actually got going, I did enjoy the product at the end of the day. Yes, it's also good to see Lewis Hamilton still has some wheel-to-wheel stuff in him. I mean, I don't think it ever went away. Always was saying, like, even last year, like, everyone just assumed that, it was just a different team. He was going to come out and just dominate. He wins that sprint race in China, ironically enough, last year, and then everything kind of goes away. And some of the stuff that I saw written about him, I'm like, guys, it's all about 26. Always about this year. It was always about the rule reset. He never got in tune with those ground effect cars, and that's just kind of how it went. And now we're seeing the fruition of it. Yeah, I know McLaren are pissed off. I've read stuff from Andrea Stella is very measured in what he says, but when he says we need to exploit the HPP relationship, that means they have to give us the whole fucking playbook now. Because they have to. And you have to tell us what the hell we're supposed to be doing with it. And it's now. The other side of that is maybe they didn't develop this car as much as they should have based on the rules, but they were in the middle of fighting for a world championship. And if you ask me as a fan, would I trade that world championship for better results this year? Oh, fuck no. 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. I will take my world championship, my driver's world championship, and go off and be quite happy. So yeah, it kind of sucks for now, but I have to put faith in that team that the structure that they've built and everything that they've done, they're going to be able to solve it. Power unit and chassis side. Because I think there's some things that are not necessarily great with the chassis. That car is very hard on its tires. And that was something that was not a problem for them last year that kind of is a problem for them this year. So it's not all the power unit. That's obviously where the headlines are, but it's both. And I do think that if they can commit themselves to a development program, we've seen before them come out with updates that are significant and matter. That's what's going to have to happen for them this season. Cody, I'll let you respond to the Max quote. I mean, it just is kind of what it is.
No, I think it's funny, definitely, and I think it's definitely applicable for John because John is the big Lewis fan and I'm the big Max fan. Starting with the McLaren stuff, actually, they have had the least amount of wind tunnel time for 2 seasons now as well. So, and going into the new set of regulations, I'm sure that was a little bit more of a disadvantage than if, say, we were staying on the same regs. But yeah, I think they're gonna build up through this if they've done the awesome upgrades, and I think as we get further into this season, they're going to really start showing up closer to the front. Yeah, it definitely stings to see how much Red Bull and Max in particular are struggling to start this season. I had all my hopes up in preseason testing with people saying that they were they're really good with the recharge and the deployment, and the car looked very tightly packaged, and I was starting to think, oh, maybe there's a chance. So to have all that wind taken out of the sails, that stings. Yeah, I don't think I share quite as extreme a view as some of the fans that John is referencing. I'm don't get me wrong, I'm definitely a Max fanboy, and I definitely still think that he is the most talented driver on the grid right now. But you think about any racing series is you've got a driver and you've got a car. You need both those things to be good in order to have a shot at the front. And Max has got plenty of talent, but we saw with these last 4 seasons, like you were just talking about with Lewis Hamilton, Lewis has had that talent the whole time, and we're seeing it again now, in his 40s at the team that he didn't win all his championships with. He's up against Charles Leclerc, who is another one of the very best on the grid right now, and they are very evenly matched between the two of them right now. So, but these last 4 years in the ground effect era, it's just not a car that he liked to drive. Mercedes was never really a championship contender. He wasn't really jiving with the style of driving that was required of those cars. So I think we're just seeing the same thing with Max Verstappen right now. He's been very open that he doesn't like these cars. He doesn't like how you have to drive them. And they are very, very clearly not a front running competitor right now. And they're coming to this with, their own brand new power unit. There's always going to be hiccups. The thing that is worst about this in my book, though, is that Max has been very open about how he's done everything that he wanted to do in Formula One. He has nothing left to prove, and he is very interested in doing other things with his career, trying other racing series, doing more with his sim racing projects and teams and the like. And I genuinely think that's how he feels about it. Yeah, I think he's telling the truth when he says that he could retire from the sport happy. And that to me really stings because he's my favorite driver. And if things don't get back on board with Red Bull here really soon, I think it's a legitimate chance that come the end of the season, he'd be like, hey, my exit clause was triggered because the team did not perform very well this year. And I'm just going to go do sim racing and race, at the Nürburgring a few times a year and maybe take a shot at Le Mans and sail off into the sunset. And that would just really rain on my parade.
Well, and he might just as easily, we've talked about this a couple times, he might just pull an Alonso and go away for a year or two, see what the next rules package is. And if it, here's what I would say. If you are a non-fan of these rules, we know we've only committed to these for 3 years. I will also tell you that behind the scenes, we know where the FIA stands. Mohammed Ben Sulayem has been pretty open about what kind of a formula he wants. He wants V8s, sustainable fuel, cruise elements, kind of the simplified version of a lot of this. And now that he's won his re-election and is probably feeling himself, can he actually rally enough to get those types of things come in? But, we're at the beginning of a rules package. We're already talking about the next set of rules. And it's like, can we at least let this mature and see where it's going to go? It'd be interesting to see if Max can get around the rules or if Red Bull can kind of step into and develop their car if that sentiment continues. Because what we've heard are the drivers that are, there's a direct correlation between the drivers that are more pissed off at the rules and the success level that they're having. And I think Lewis is a very interesting case on this because in the first race, when he saw the gap to the Mercedes and it was 0.8 of a second and they were 0.9 off, he was pissed that Saturday. But come that Sunday when he's now in P4 and they're 35 seconds clear of the next car, now he's better. It's just kind of interesting. Yeah, I'm not saying that he's lying. I'm not accusing him of not being truthful. I think he is probably having a much better time of it. How could you not be?
Exactly.
I think that is actually genuine. But it's also, there's a direct correlation between who's pissed off and the success level that they're having. I think Ali Behrman loves these rules right now. These are the best things ever as far as he's concerned. So
he's loving them.
We'll just roll with it for the time being, and that's kind of just how we roll in the Piranha Club that is Formula One. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
I agreed there, and thank you everyone for your emails.
Yes, thank you all for contributing to the email discussion. It's good to have a good little spirited debate there. All right, so we will move into our awards. Look at this. I can't even get pissed off at my rubbish. We'll start with our rubbish award, but I'll try. And I'm just going to say, electrical issues, you can go suck on an egg, man. That sucked. That just bit harder than you could imagine. I'm trying to watch the pre-race stuff and, I'm trying to get excited and I'm trying to get built up for the race. And there goes one McLaren not in the garage. God dang it. And then you want to watch Piastri just get wheeled off and it's so quiet on the onboard, and all you hear is the squeaking of the wheel underneath the car. And it's
Yeah.
like, you've gotta be kidding me, man. Hey, better be another 30 years before that happens again. That's all I gotta say. Ick.
Fingers crossed. My rubbish award is going to go to Esteban Ocon because he admitted that what he did was rubbish. Yeah, a little too anxious there to try to get ahead of Colapinto. Ended up making a mistake. It's just very fortunate that it didn't ruin both the races. Yeah, pretty egregious, obvious fault going to Ocon for the incident between the two of them.
All right, very good. All right, we'll turn to analysis paralysis, and this one was actually pretty hard because it's hard to find with a one-stop race with a safety car that caused basically all the pit stops, and everybody hung it out for 40-some laps on the set of Pirelli hard tires. So I guess that's a positive. And none of the tires failed, so Pirelli get gold stars for that. We didn't have issues with them. But I'm going to give this one actually to Ferrari because if they were, I guess, maybe I'm being hypercritical here, but if they were really serious about trying to win the race, that would have been the time to tell both your drivers, knock it off and go win the race, and we'll fight with each other there for P1 versus P3. But they didn't. And therefore, my quote was Antonelli should kiss both Ferrari drivers because it was their fight that let him scamper off into the distance.
Mm-hmm.
But Cody, what you got?
My analysis paralysis is that the softs may have been a play if Max could have actually gotten off the line. And I did think it was kind of bold. He wasn't, super far back in the pack. Definitely not where it's used to being, but he wasn't like in the lower half of the field. So I did think it was pretty bold to put him on softs, especially after they saw what happened off the line in the sprint race. And lo and behold, it happened again. So any advantage that Max would have had on those soft tires was now being used to repass all the cars that passed him off the line. And those tires didn't last very long at all. He ends up having to take a fairly early pit stop to get off of those and had a really bad turn of bad luck because of that, because pretty much one lap after he gets off those soft tires, you have the safety car. So he's wasted the opportunity at a cheap pit stop. And so, yeah, his day just kept getting worse and worse and worse until finally the car gave up.
Yep. Yeah, it was. I could understand you being a very frustrated fan this weekend. It seemed like everything was just not going his way at all by any stretch of the imagination there. All right. So dark horse of the day. We have consensus on this one. I'll go first with this one. Ollie Behrman, man. Loving life at the moment is a good place to be for if you're one Ollie Behrman. He's had a great start to the season. In front of the defending world champion right now in the driver's standings, and his team is 1 point adrift of the defending constructors champions. A great start for Haas, a great start for Ollie Behrman. Clearly dark horse again this weekend. Cody, what you got?
Yeah, I agree. It's going to go to Oliver Behrman, and if he keeps this up, he's not going to be in dark horse contention anymore because we're going to start to expect him to be mixing it up in the top 5 or 6 every week. So we're going to have to he's either going to have to get a podium to get that dark horse award, or we're going to have to start going to some other people. But I'm pretty sure out of our joint contention in this for the first 2 races, I'm pretty sure we've given it to him 3 out of the possible 4 times.
Yeah, I mean he's raising the bar. I mean that is the definition of him raising the bar. So good on you, Ollie, for that. And he's very young. He's got age on his side, just like Antonelli has very much age on his side. Driver of the day. This one is easy. Kimi and Andrea Kimi. No, Antonelli. Easily the driver of the day. Great recovery from a not auspicious start in the weekend. It proves what happens in the sprint quality, what happens in the sprint does not necessarily dictate the whole rest of your weekend. I think that's also a good thing for the sport as a whole. But yeah, Antonelli, just a great sublime drive. One little moment there, but he got through it, managed to bring the car home. Enjoy the victory, Sir Kimi. All right, Cody, what you got?
I have also got to give it to Kimi Antonelli, not really taking into too much consideration the earlier parts of the weekend, because he was able to turn around and get that first win. And he did it in fairly dominant fashion, too. Like, he had some help along the way there with George having technical issues during qualifying and, the Ferraris being so fast off the line that they gave him a little bit of breathing room between him and George, who is realistically his, most pressing competition probably every race now. So he did get some help, but he definitely kept it consistent pretty much throughout the whole race, built up a nice gap and brought it home pretty comfortably. So he is my driver of the day.
All right, very good. All right, before we head on out, we do have to talk about predictions. I guess in one sense we were closer. Like, I think we were around the points, but we just didn't score a whole lot. Cody, you got 2 points. However, you did get me on the quali pull time, and you did get the prop bet because your number of finishers was a lot closer to reality than mine. I thought there would be a lot more reliability, and I was very, very wrong as it turned out in the end there. But I
They,
ended up, go ahead.
I was just going to say, after Max retired, I guessed 14 for number of Class 5 finishers, and they brought in, I think it was Ocon or at one point, and because they ended up deciding they were going to try to clip off what was remaining of that kind of barge board that they've got at the front. When they got him in, I was looking at the lap counter and calculating the 90% race distance. I'm like, holy shit, if they retire him right now, I'm going to get it dead on. But no, they sent him back out.
No, but you were definitely closer than mine by a long stretch of the imagination. So good job there. I ended up with 3 points on the weekend. I got P3 for the podium. Thank you to Sir Lewis Hamilton there. I did get the fastest overall lap time, and I got the fastest driver because I believe that ended up being Kimi Antonelli. That was my pick way back when we did predictions. So I have a 2-0 lead in our predictions game this season. All right, well, that will do it for an actually very engaging Chinese GP weekend. The F1 circus takes a break for a week, but then we get to go to a much different track. How is this going to play with these new cars? If we see the same kind of passing we saw in China, in Japan, we know at least there's hope for these regulations yet, because Japan has always been a very tough track to make overtakes on. So that's where we're going. The cherry blossoms will be in full bloom. It's a great track. It's an old school track. Old school meets new school with Formula One this season. So yeah, I just gonna hopefully better weekend for both our respective teams. May we actually get through a race distance without any issues, and we'll see kind of where we sit. But yeah, Cody, any final thoughts before we hop on out?
Just that I really like the Japan track. I think it's a really fun one. Fortunately, Japan is one of those tracks that's really, really fun to watch for qualifying. I don't know if that's going to really carry over right now, but I am cautiously optimistic about how it's going to go, and I have to soak it up as much as I can, because then we're going to have like a month off. You have to enjoy while it's here.
Yeah. Well, and we will be back with a preview probably the Wednesday night before Japan, before Media Day kicks off, probably just as I'm editing. Some major story will break, true Outlap F1 podcast fashion. But we'll see what happens with that. But until then, take care of yourselves. Crazy ass world out there. As always, folks, may all your laps be fast.